If your energy isn't right, you are not going to be able to accomplish and achieve the things that you want in your life. So, how do you get your energy right? Well, I am glad you asked. In this week's episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show, I interview an energy alignment coach, Coach Diamond Drip. We talk about how she got to where she is today, psychedelics, philosophy, psychology, quantum physics, all the different things that you need to know in order to align your energy. And we also jump into human design and gene keys. So if you are interested, get ready for an awesome interview. If you love what you are hearing, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a comment or any feedback, and let's go ahead and jump into the podcast. We are back with another excellent episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show. I have a very special guest. She is an energy alignment coach. She is a motivational speaker, or she's a speaker. I don't know I added the motivational part, but I'll let her do an introduction herself. Diamond Drip, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Motivational speaker is completely accurate. Motivational, transformational, any of those adjectives will work. I am excited to be here with you and listeners.
Motivational and transformational. I love it. I love those two adjectives. And I've been talking about wanting more spiritual guests on the show. And you know what? I manifested it. I got this LinkedIn message from Diamond Drip. I saw the last name Drip. I had to ask my daughters, what does drip mean? They were like, man, that's like, it's a really positive thing. And so I was like, oh, cool. This is really cool. And so when I connected, I looked at your LinkedIn profile. Everything on there totally resonated with me. So before we jump in, can you give the audience kind of just a short version of your origin story, how you got to become this energy alignment coach, and allow the audience to just get to know you a little bit better before we jump into the topics for the day?
For sure. So my journey into this energy alignment coaching thing, it started when I lost my job as a general manager because the location lost its lease. So it was something that I didn't have any control over. I had just signed my first grown-up lease for a 2-bedroom apartment for me and my daughter. And I did that with the thinking that I was going to have this salary job to sustain me. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, I am kind of tired of trying to make these molds fit that people say will make you successful. Like, get a good job, like get you a salary job with the benefits, go to the military, because that's a pathway. And I was in school pursuing my degree, so I was still figuring out that path. And so I was like, well, since these other paths that people say should work aren't working, why don't I try and make my own path? And so I started my entrepreneurship journey like 4 years ago. And my first business was a product-based business, which I always say it allowed me to grow a successful business in the blissful ignorance of my own self-worth. Because when you have a product business, you have the product and then you have the profit margin, and then that's the price. You run sales and things like that. But at the end of the day, the price is the price. And so when I participated in a clinical trial that actually healed a decade's worth of depression that I had been under the dark cloud of, it kind of awakened me to seeing that there was more to life than just having these businesses and being in school and being the mom and trying to do all of the things, burning out while trying to do all of the things. And so I made a pivot into a service-based model because with that big picture lens that I put on after the trial, I was like, what is it that I love out of both of my businesses that I can take with me and do the thing that I love out of both? And so in the product-based business, I would listen to people's problems. I would listen to their ailments. I would listen to what they were going through so that I could make the best product recommendations. And in my graphic design business, I would listen to the business owners. They would kind of fumble their way through who they thought their niche was, only to find out that it wasn't that, so that we could create graphics and logos and websites that spoke to their ideal client. And then of course I would turn around and do all the video editing and the photoshopping in addition to that. So this element of coaching was always something that was there. I just at the time that I was making the pivot, there weren't a lot of there wasn't a lot of language for the coaching that I wanted to do. And so it was business coach or life coach. And I am young. So I had a lot of doubts around people taking me seriously as a life coach because even though I have experienced a lot of life has happened a lot. I didn't know that they would take me seriously. And not only that, as a life coach, your clients have to be willing to do the work themselves. And so if they aren't doing the work and you're meeting every week and they're just kind of there for an hour and then they don't apply the things, then it can very quickly become something where you're seen as this not effective coach. And as someone who suffered from depression for a long time, I know that in 6 months, you can't just guarantee that someone is going to feel better. So I say this too out of fear and doubt and all of that. I was like, okay, well, I built a successful business. So why don't I just do business coaching? That seems like something that I can really sink my teeth into. And my niche, because I was in a business coaching program that was all about the proven strategies and frameworks and things like that. And so they told me to niche for now. And my niche were women service based entrepreneurs. And all of the imposter syndrome kicked in because even though I had grown a successful business, I hadn't grown a successful service-based business. And so a lot of the strategies and the methods that I was bringing into my business coaching, I was learning through the business coaching program. And I knew that it worked because it was working for the women who were in the program with me. Like they were celebrating, 5-figure launches, 6-figure launches. And I was like, this stuff works because we're all learning the same thing. It just wasn't quite working the same for me. And so it just made me feel all of these different things. And so, in an effort to figure out what my business superpower was, I went on this search of trying to figure out these different niches. So I was all about, and still am, all about systems because the more systems you have in place in your business, the more you can work in it versus on it. I was all about AI. And so for that, my youth, kind of helped me a little bit. But
Definitely.
A- but AI, everyone was talking about AI. So that couldn't be necessarily my superpower because everyone was trying to get a foothold on how to use these different AI tools and things. And everywhere that I went, people would always talk about my energy. And it was honestly something that began to frustrate me because I was like, if I could bottle my energy up and sell it or teach someone how to have my energy, I would, because I have a partner who I would love to teach how to have my energy and it doesn't work. But it began to be something that I saw as it was outside of me. It was like everyone loves this energy thing over here, but what's my superpower? And I met someone in the online networking space who she had done the thing that I was scared to do. And so she had 20 years of business coaching and consulting experience. And when I met her, she was going by the title of intuitive life coach. And I was like, how did you do that? Because I would love to like make that pivot as well. And we became fast friends. We're actually business partners now, but she was the person who asked me the critical question, do you know your energy type? And I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about at all. And she sent me this calculator on the Jovian Archive website. And their whole model is to give you like literally the bare minimum information so that you can buy the report that's like 50 pages right below. I was like, I'm
The lead
not
magnet.
buying right. I'm not buying a report for something I don't know anything about. So in human design, I'm a 5-1, and the one is the researcher. And immediately the researcher kicked in. I went to YouTube University and I was like, what does it mean to be a generator in human design? And the video talked about like when you are doing work that you love, when you are lit up, you generate so much energy that it literally like bubbles up in you and it spills out of you into the people that are around you, into the things that you're doing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. And every other thing that I found, emotional authority, being a 5-1, having an open, undefined heart center, like everything just validated who I was on such a deep level. And then I did it on my daughter and it explained why we are different. And then I looked at my partner's energy and it explained why we are different. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to apply to business coaching, but I have to figure out a way. And through many months of stumbling, that's how I came to be this energy alignment coach who focuses on getting you to understand who you are on a deep level so that you're not stuck in comparison. You're not stuck in self-doubt and fear of like, what if I do this? Like, because you learned that something could make you successful, but you're not sure what's authentic to you. And so it's hard to step into things with that confidence. And once we get them to an understanding of who they are on a soul level, then we start talking about like who your niche is and what you can be posting on social media and things like that. So that's kind of like the journey of how we got here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. There was a lot to unpack there. And, a couple of things. Well, number one was when you did that trials, did you know you were depressed already? Or was that kind of shown to you that, like, oh, wow, I've been going through life like depressed without knowing?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 when I was 14. And the reason for that diagnosis, I believe.
We are back with another excellent episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality show. I have a very special guest. She is an energy alignment coach. She is a motivational speaker, or she's a speaker. I don't know about, I added the motivational part, but I'll let her do an introduction herself. Diamond Drip, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Motivational speaker is completely accurate. Motivational, transformational, any of those adjectives will work. I am excited to be here with you and listeners.
Motivational and transformational. I love it. I love those two adjectives. And I've been talking about wanting more spiritual guests on the show. And you know what? I manifested it. I got this LinkedIn message from Diamond Drip. I saw the last name Drip. I had to ask my daughters, what does drip mean? They were like, man, that's like, it's a really positive thing. And so I was like, oh, cool. This is really cool. And so when I connected, I looked at your LinkedIn profile. Everything on there totally resonated with me. So before we jump in, can you give the audience kind of just a short version of your origin story, how you got to become this energy alignment coach? And allow the audience to just get to know you a little bit better before we jump into the topics for the day.
For sure. So my journey into this energy alignment coaching thing, it started when I lost my job as a general manager because the location lost its lease. So it was something that like I didn't have any control over. I had just signed my first grown up lease for a 2-bedroom apartment for me and my daughter. And I did that with the thinking that I was gonna have this salary job to, like, sustain me, and so when that when that happened, I was like, "Okay, I am kind of tired of trying to make these molds fit that people say will make you successful, like get a good job, like get you a salary job with the benefits, go to the military, because that's a pathway. And I was in school pursuing my degree, so I was still figuring out that path. And so I was like, well, since these other paths that people say should work aren't working, why don't I try and make my own path? And so I started my entrepreneurship journey like 4 years ago. And my first business was a product based business, which I always say it allowed me to grow a successful business in the blissful ignorance of my own self worth.
Mm.
Because when you have a product business, you have the product and then you have the profit margin, and then that's the price. You run sales and things like that. But at the end of the day, the price is the price. And so when I participated in a clinical trial that actually healed a decade's worth of depression that I had been under the dark cloud of, it kind of awakened me to seeing that there was more to life than just having these businesses and being in school and being the mom and trying to do all of the things, burning out while trying to do all of the things. And so I made a pivot into a service-based model because with that big picture lens that I put on after the trial, I was like, what is it that I love out of both of my businesses that I can take with me and do the thing that I love out of both? And so in the product-based business, I would listen to people's problems. I would listen to their ailments. I would listen to what they were going through so that I could make the best product recommendations. And in my graphic design business, I would listen to the business owners. They would kind of fumble their way through who they thought their niche was, only to find out that it wasn't that, so that we could create graphics and logos and websites that spoke to their ideal client. And then of course I would turn around and do all the video editing and the photoshopping in addition to that. So this element of coaching was always something that was there. I just at the time that I was making the pivot, there weren't a lot of there wasn't a lot of language for the coaching that I wanted to do. And so it was business coach or life coach. And I am young. So I had a lot of doubts around people taking me seriously as a life coach because even though I have experienced a lot of life has happened a lot, I didn't know that they would take me seriously. And not only that, as a life coach, your clients have to be willing to do the work themselves. And so if they aren't doing the work and you're meeting every week and they're just kind of there for an hour and then they don't apply the things, then it can very quickly become something where you're seen as this not effective coach. And as someone who suffered from depression for a long time, I know that in 6 months, you can't just guarantee that someone is going to feel better. So I say this too out of fear and doubt and all of that. I was like, okay, well, I built a successful business, so why don't I just do business coaching? That seems like something that I can really sink my teeth into. And my niche, because I was in a business coaching program that was all about the proven strategies and frameworks and things like that. And so they told me to niche for now. And my niche were women service based entrepreneurs. And all of the imposter syndrome kicked in because even though I had grown a successful business, I hadn't grown a successful service-based business. And so a lot of the strategies and the methods that I was bringing into my business coaching, I was learning through the business coaching program. And I knew that it worked because it was working for the women who were in the program with me. Like they were celebrating, 5-figure launches, 6-figure launches. And I was like, this stuff works because we're all learning the same thing. It just wasn't quite working the same for me. And so it just made me feel all of these different things. And so, in an effort to figure out what my business superpower was, I went on this search of trying to figure out these different niches. So I was all about, and still am, all about systems, because the more systems you have in place in your business, the more you can work in it versus on it. I was all about AI. And so for that, my youth, kind of helped me a little bit. But
Definitely.
A- but AI, everyone was talking about AI. So that couldn't be necessarily my superpower, because everyone was trying to get a foothold on how to use these different AI tools and things. And everywhere that I went, people would always talk about my energy. And it was honestly something that began to frustrate me, because I was like, if I could bottle my energy up and sell it or teach someone how to have my energy, I would, because I have a partner who I would love to teach how to have my energy, and it doesn't work. But it began to be something that I saw as it was outside of me. It was like, everyone loves this energy thing over here, but what's my superpower? And I met someone in the online networking space who, she had done the thing that I was scared to do. And so she had 20 years of business coaching and consulting experience. And when I met her, she was going by the title of intuitive life coach. And I was like, how did you do that? Because I would love to like make that pivot as well. And we became fast friends. We're actually business partners now, but she was the person who asked me the critical question, do you know your energy type? And I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about at all. And she sent me this calculator on the Jovian Archive website. And their whole model is to give you like literally the bare minimum information so that you can buy the report that's like 50 pages right below. I was like, I'm
The lead
not
magnet.
buying right. I'm not buying a report for something I don't know anything about. So in human design, I'm a 5-1, and the one is the researcher. And immediately the researcher kicked in. I went to YouTube University and I was like, what does it mean to be a generator in human design? And the video talked about like when you are doing work that you love, when you are lit up, you generate so much energy that it literally like bubbles up in you, and it spills out of you into the people that are around you, into the things that you're doing. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. And every other thing that I found, emotional authority, being a 5-1, having an open, undefined heart center, like everything just validated who I was on such a deep level. And then I did it on my daughter, and it explained why we are different. And then I looked at my partner's energy, and it explained why we are different. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to apply to business coaching, but I have to figure out a way. And through many months of stumbling, that's how I came to be this energy alignment coach who focuses on getting you to understand who you are on a deep level, so that you're not stuck in comparison. You're not stuck in self-doubt and fear of like, what if I do this? Like, because you learned that something could make you successful, but you're not sure what's authentic to you. And so it's hard to step into things with that confidence. And once we get them to an understanding of who they are on a soul level, then we start talking about like who your niche is and what you can be posting on social media and things like that. So that's kind of like the journey of how we got here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. There was a lot to unpack there. And, a couple of things. Well, number one was when you did that trials, did you know you were depressed already? Or was that kind of shown to you that, like, oh, wow, I've been going through life like depressed without knowing?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 when I was 14. And the reason for that diagnosis, I believe that time, I've been hospitalized multiple times. For context, my mom is undiagnosed borderline personality disorder. And so as a minor, it felt like there was no escape
Mm.
except for to leave this planet. And so I have had a few different suicidal attempts. I've had suicidal ideations. I've run away and self-harmed. And so those things land you in the hospital. And so the diagnosis that I received was bipolar 2. And I was actually in denial from from that for a long time because I just thought I was depressed. I didn't necessarily see the waves of, because I was thinking bipolar 1. I didn't necessarily see the waves that they saw, until later, like, actually a little less than a year before I actually found the trial that was for my exact diagnosis. So, I knew that depression was always a thing. What I will say is that I didn't think that it was as serious as it was before the trial, because as a teen, like, around my teenage years is when the suicidal attempts and ideation, well, not ideations, but the suicidal attempts kind of stopped because I was removed from my mom's care when I was 15 due to child abuse and neglect. So once I was removed from her care, it kind of like gave me a new outlook on life, and it removed some of the control that I felt like I was under the thumb of. But that trial showed me that even though I wasn't actively acting on the suicidal thoughts, I was having passive suicidal thoughts, which I didn't know were a thing.
Yeah. Well, what a gift to see you here today. And a couple of weeks ago, I was at a medicine journey, and one of the stories that the person shared, it was about a Jewish paratrooper. She got captured in Nazi Germany. She was tortured and eventually killed, but they found in her pocket this piece of paper, and on the piece of paper, it was about how grateful she was for all of these experiences that she's had, being able to defend her country, even being captured, being able to do what she knew was right. Um, and even though she was killed, she was still grateful for her experience here. And she had a quote, and it was in German, but it translates to gratitude turns suffering into meaning. And when I heard that, it really resonated with me because, well, no one, I don't think, would be like, "Oh, I wanna go through what Diamond went through," but I can see with, like, your energy today that all those things actually shaped you, and I believe turned into your superpower and why you could hold space for other people and be very understanding of, like, "Hey, physiologically, when your body's going through something, yeah, maybe I could tell you all the things to do, but if the energy's not right, if the energy's not flowing the way it should be, then it's going to be hard to execute." And, I've been to similar business classes for business coaching where they're like, yeah, niche down, find your right avatar, do this, this, and this. And some people would be super successful, and then other people would be really struggling with the same framework. And I would always be like a little bit confused as to like, why is this? It worked for me. So I was just like, yeah, super happy. But then I would be like, how come it doesn't work for these other people? And, as you were sharing your own story, it kinda clicked in my mind was like, yeah, the people that were successful with it, they were bringing like a very, like, optimistic type of energy into it. The people that were not doing well had so many reasons why they weren't doing well, and just being in this, like, different energetic state. And for those that are listening, like, when people are talking about energy, like, I think I still have groups of friends that are very like scientific, rational, logical. They're like, energy just sounds like so, it's not something tangible. And, I told them, like, if you look at the latest models of quantum physics, it's everything is energy. This is energy. This is energy. It's just energy that's in a different frequency. So some things are solid, some things are more energetic and like kind of like, I don't know, not as opaque,
Yeah.
and so I just wanted people to kinda understand, like, where we're coming from because I do believe that quantum physics, by the time I think in, like, just a couple of more decades, is gonna be able to explain a lot of these spiritual concepts that may take a little bit of faith to first jump into, but I believe just like you, when you experience these things firsthand, it's not a fact of, like, "Do I believe this?" or not, it's like you just know that there's like this fundamental truth to the universe. And so I'm super glad that we got connected. Um and yeah, I'm glad that you're really doing this work because I believe that it takes a lot of courage to talk about these things online. It's like, hey, I'm in the business world, I'm on LinkedIn, everyone's talking about marketing and sales and operational efficiency. And then there's like you and me talking about quantum energy. And, I don't know like if people are like, these guys are crazy or what, but I'm just glad that you're here and I'm definitely one of your allies in this space.
Yes, I'm so glad that we connected too, because it takes being able to find people like us. Like there are people who believe the things that we do, who believe that everything is energy in the business world. But because there are so many people who kinda look at you like you grew a 3rd head when you start talking about being a vibrational match for the things that you want, and they're like, "Mm," and then it creates this doubt and skepticism. So when you can find people, when you can build community with people who believe those same things, it's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not crazy like these other people are trying to make me feel."
Yeah. All right, so let's jump into the meat of this. What is human design? What is gene keys? What do we need? What do I need to understand so I have a proper foundation so I could ask you the right questions about this?
Yeah, I love that. So I have been working on making these definitions more relatable. So here's my stab. So human design is a it pulls from a bunch of different sciences to help you form this map, if you will. It's like a owner's manual, owner's guide to this vessel. Because a lot of people in the spiritual community, especially like in like faith-based communities, we believe that we are a mind, we're a body, and that we're a spirit. And so I like to say that human design gives you a turn by turn, like instruction manual, if you will, for the energy that is in your vessel. Our soul chose different gifts, it chose different strengths in this lifetime to help us fulfill whatever the purpose is that we came into this lifetime to do. And so it helps you see areas where you might lean into fear, you might lean into self doubt. These are our areas of deepest wisdom. It also helps you to see areas that you're very defined in. It helps you see the energy that you put out into the world. And it gives you kind of like guidelines. It doesn't put you in a box because at the end of the day, we all have free will, but it kind of gives you guidelines on how you can show up in your most authentic self, how you can step into the fullness of who you are and do the work that you came here to do. And so, one of the sciences that human design pulls from is the Chinese I Ching and also quantum physics. And so Gene Keys takes a closer look at these two things because in Gene Keys, it relates to like the 64 gifts, the 64 strengths, the 64 gates. And every single one of those has a different vibration. It has a shadow, it has a gift, and then it has like everything's clicking, your vibration is raised, it's high. We call that the city. And so every single one of those 64 has a different vibration. And a lot of times when we're not aware, when we're not awakened, we live in the shadow. And so it's all
Mm.
about looking at where you've lived in the shadow and how moving forward you can step into the gifts that you were actually meant to be living.
Yeah. You use the word awaken, and I'm so bummed out that the word woke is like,
Yeah.
considered a
Yes.
negative thing now. I mean, it's truly like the best way to describe, and the people that are so anti-woke culture, I always like tell them, sorry, like you're one of the people that are asleep. Like it's hard to point that out. And, I think what I think I heard is that human design gene keys give you like a good idea of like your operating system. So things that you're optimized for, things that you might not be so good at, but it's not designed to say, hey, you can never do these things. Like you like, but it's more like just, hey, like if you're tall and you're good at shooting, you might wanna play basketball. If you're short, stocky, and muscular, you might wanna be a wrestler, it just kinda gives you some idea of, like, where your skill set might be optimized, but doesn't limit you to just that. So I really love that idea, and yeah, I didn't know it was drawing from the I Ching, and what was the other, thing that it was drawing from?
The gene keys.
Yeah.
Quantum physics. So when
Oh,
you said
quantum physics.
when you said quantum physics earlier, I was like, "Oh, that's one of the sciences."
Okay, awesome. And so what I really love is, like, there's, like, a shadow side, what was the one? Gift side?
Mhm.
Or and then it sounded like there was, like, the limitless pill, like, super saiyan level of, like, each of these
The
64
city.
combinations, right? The city.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
man, that's really cool. And I love that each side has, like, its shadow side, its, gift side, and then kinda like if everything's in flow and everything's clicking, this could be like the maximum like potentiality of that. So can you give us a little bit of details on like what these 64 combinations could be?
Yeah, so I always one of the things that I learned in human design, and this was something that I'm glad I learned early, was that I'm supposed to share while I'm in the experience of something. So many of us leaders, entrepreneurs, were like, I want to get here. And then I'll tell the story of how I got there. And what I'm supposed to do is actually talk while I'm in it because people can pick up things from like you living the experience. And so I'll use my what I'm here to do and what I'm here to learn spheres to kind of give you an idea. So, Gene Key 53 is kind of like my life's work. And so that is transforming the shadow of immaturity. So, being in this place of external fixation, external validation, and moving from that into a place of internal groundedness. And so, when I do that, I transform into the gift of expansion and at the
Wow.
highest frequency is superabundance. And mind you, when I discovered Gene Keys and I saw that superabundance was like the highest frequency, I was like, well, I don't feel very abundant right now. So how do I get there? And that was one of the things that's kind of frustrating about Gene Keys in a way is that there is no quick answer. We live in like this microwave instant gratification society where it's like, okay, I am here in the shadow. How do I get to this super abundance? And the founder of Gene Keys, he's like contemplation, you know? Yes. And I'm like, no. Which is why I
Yeah.
love human design because it's like, no, like you have emotional authority. This is how this works. You have to feel into things or you have sacral authority. Um, so that's the life sphere. And then the programming partner is also called like what you're here to learn in this lifetime. And so in that sphere, I have to transform the shadow of greed into the gift of aspiration. And at its highest frequency is ascension. And so one of the things that I found with the shadow of greed is that we live in a society and a culture where money equals safety. And so even though you may just on a internal level feel like you have what you need, the world is constantly telling you that you need more. If you had more, you would have this amount of power. And so one of the things that through contemplation I noticed was that they are programming partners. Because if you limit yourself to just going for the things that will make you money, that will help you build that material safety, you're not going to expand into a lot of things because you're going to be limited by that mindset that says, if this doesn't do this, then I'm not going to do it. Instead of looking at, is this going to bring me joy? Is this going to bring me fulfillment? Is this going to bring me satisfaction? And trusting that if we just do these things, the material will come. So
Yeah.
that was one of my takeaways from the
Uh,
concept.
I love that. I love that. And I try to not have these as interviews and more like conversations. So, I'm going to sprinkle in a little bit of my own opinions. And experience. So number one, what I really liked was, I think earlier you were talking about like, yeah, after 6 months of coaching, like you could probably transform a few behaviors, but like transformation to me is just like a lifelong thing that we do. We're just evolving. We're going through transitions all the time, and there never is like this end point. That's the way I look at it. And so, as someone that worked as a transformation coach, I did notice, like, yeah, like there are ways to shift behaviors or to get someone to achieve and accomplish something, but like it's hard for them to like keep that way of being because it's, in my opinion, it's like just kind of like shifting behavior so much versus actually, shifting intrinsically, like what the belief systems that are causing whatever behavior is to come out. So I really resonated with that. Number two is, the whole thing about abundance, the whole thing about abundance, and then you talking about most people are here to survive. I totally get it. My view is like if you're just trying to be surviving, it's hard to be thriving. And in my meditations, what it showed me is there's like my higher self that's always looking out for my long term joy, purpose, and fulfillment. And my higher self will communicate to me in the form of like excitement, inspiration, curiosity. So, like when I get curious about something, it's like, oh, yeah, that's my higher self just kind of pointing me in that direction. And then my lower self is just here to keep me alive. Like, Seibo, hey, you got 3 job offers. Take the one that has like the best package, regardless of like who I resonate with. Or Seibo, hey, you're at a trade show conference. You should be hanging out with, all those friggin' suit and tie dudes that can get you funding or whatever versus hanging out with the stoners that are, taking dabs on the side who I really want to hang out with. And so, I've noticed that when I follow my highest joy or highest level of interest, things just auto-magically fall in place, and I always say it's unpredictably reliable, and then a lot of my clients go, "Well, that's not good enough for me. I want it to be predictably reliable." And then I'm like, "Well, you've been trying to control everything. Like, has that been predictably reliable? No. Okay, so control doesn't give you what you want either." So I've learned to just really surrender and kind of follow. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you was, you know, I know that when I think about abundance, I think about financial abundance. And in one of my meditations, it really taught me about like, abundance is a lot of other things: abundance of time, abundance of community, abundance of creativity, abundance of connection. And, I feel like when I look at my life that way, I could definitely see like I'm more abundant than ever. And when I focused on financial abundance, like those other areas of like community, relationships, time, abundance of like great physical health, like all those things kind of like, really went down. So was I really abundant? And people have heard this story quite a few times because I've shared it. But, I walked away from my company when we had done 38 million. And a lot of people just thought I was super crazy. But I've never been more depressed in my life about like, whoa, I have what I thought I was always looking for. Now that I have it, I'm not happy. Holy shit, like, what do I do next? And that was kind of like the catalyst for me to start looking at things outside of my five senses. I have done a ton of psychedelics in my life, but I still remained an atheist. And it was my wife finally sat me down to do this 90-minute Joe Dispenza meditation where when I did that meditation, I started I started hearing voices, but these voices were similar to the voices on mushrooms or ayahuasca. So I was like, wait a second, like now I have access to this. And then what I realized was the plant medicines were raising my frequency temporarily. So I had access to these higher dimensional knowledge. But if you really worked at it and cultivated it at home, you could start reaching those states without taking exogenous molecules. And I love that you're nodding your head in agreement because many times when I'm given this spiel, people are just like, it might be time to leave right now. This guy had me initially, but now he lost me. But yeah, I'm just curious, like my share, what did it bring up for you?
Yeah, so, 2 things. I wanna talk about people and their certainty, so I wanna name that, but I wanna speak to what you just talked about. So, I recognize after the trial was like a hero dose experience, so, like, 5 grams of mushrooms to really get you the synesthesia, the seeing music, all of the things. But I still microdose. And one of the things, especially after one of the interviews that I did, I communicate with the mushrooms now because before I microdosed, like I had kind of an intention, like just make me more understanding, make me more empathetic, but like literally every time that I make a mushroom microdose capsule, I am like putting positivity while I feel the capsule, and I hold it up to my third eye, and I'm always asking, I'm like, connect me to my higher self, connect me to divine source, help me still with the things, empathy, understanding, patience. And then depending on where I am that day, I will ask for it to help me with, whatever it is that I think I need help with that day. And when you speak about first, I love Dr. Joe Dispenza, like his science of like how our beliefs and our thoughts can actually change our health is amazing. But when you talk about, you know, the recognition of doing that meditation gave you access to it without the plant medicine, it just reminds me that it is a tool. It is just a way to help you connect to those higher that higher self, if you will. And it my inner critic is still really strong. I'm still in that deconditioning phase. Like I believe wholeheartedly in everything that I speak about, that I work with my clients on, but I have times too where that inner critic is so loud and it's like, you can't think you are, like, really? Like, and sometimes, sometimes she gets me, sometimes she doesn't. And I'm picking up strategies on how to shed that, but to know that, I've you're not the first person that I've heard that's talked about being able to access those higher consciousness voices without plant medicine, and it just gives me hope that, like, while this is a tool that's helping me now, I full well know that I'll be able to access this information at some point without it, and that just I'm excited for that, honestly. And then the second thing that I wanted to go back to was when you were talking about your work as a transformational coach and how so many people we're like, "Oh, I want something that's predictable. I want something that's like I can be, I can know is gonna work." It just reminds me that in human design, one of the energy centers is the ajna, and only like 23% of the population has this center defined. So everyone else doesn't have consistent access, like, which is great because that mean like people when they have definition in this area, they kind of when a problem arises, when a challenge arises, they attack it from the same angle. They can learn new angles to attack it from, but it would take longer versus someone with a undefined or a completely open ajna. Affirmations work really well for us because if we just like say the things and we think the thoughts repeatedly, we can actually change our beliefs. But the not self question that comes from an undefined or an open ajna center is, am I trying to convince everyone that I'm certain? And so because we live in this culture that prizes logic and all of the things, the analytical, it's like, I can't like, what? Like, how do I count on this intuition thing? Because like our intuition, our higher selves, it speaks to us, it's not always the same thing. It's not always in the same voice, especially like so it's like, you want me to trust something that like I can't, right? With the five senses. I can't see or touch or feel like it's like one of those things. And so it just made me laugh because most likely those clients, they either had it undefined or open and they're like, I need to be certain about this though. I need to know that this is going to be a consistent thing.
Yeah. And does the ajna, does that match up with one of the 7 main chakras, or which one
Yeah.
is that one?
Yeah. So we had a, this is belief, but we had a split somewhere around like the discovery of Uranus from seven centered beings to nine centered beings. So the crown, the ajna, the throat, those stayed the same. But the solar plexus and the heart center, it had like a split. So we have the G center in human design, which is like the center for love, identity, and direction. And then we have the heart center, or the ego center, it's sometimes referred to as, which is the center for like willpower and self esteem and things like that. And then you have the solar plexus, which had the split. So you have the solar plexus, which is all about like emotions and how you process the energy from like people who have an undefined solar plexus. They are said to be empaths because they take in the energy of others, which is like really confusing for
Mm.
them, especially when they're young. And they're sometimes labeled as like emotional because like they have these short fuses, and it's because they don't know what energy is theirs and what energy they're taking in from other people. Like they don't have the separation just yet. And so that split into the spleen and the solar plexus. And so the spleen is like all of our fears, all of our like what keeps us healthy, all of those things. So a lot of the centers are the same. So the crown, the ajna, the throat, the G center split into the G and the heart ego center. The solar plexus split into the spleen and the solar plexus, but you still have the sacral and the root center.
Got it, got it. So it's more or less the same system, but the heart and the sacral are split into 2 that are just a bit more, clearly defined about what
Yeah.
each of them do, and then the ajna is the 3rd eye.
Yeah, that's where, yeah.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Oh man, there was, like, so many things that I wanted to talk about, let me just kinda focus on one of them. Okay, so when you were talking about, um people with, like, a undefined ajna. Can you kind of, clarify, like, what does undefined ajna actually mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So when you look at your human design chart, you'll see all the shapes. Some shapes have color. On my website, it's either dark blue or light blue because I can customize it. A lot of times it's like red or black. Um, and then you have shapes that don't have any color. So some inside of the shapes there are little numbers. And so if one of the numbers is highlighted, that means that you have that gift, that strength, that gate activated. And so if this is there, you have gates activated, but the actual energy center is white, that's called undefined because you don't have consistent access to it. It doesn't connect to one of your other energy centers. And so the energy doesn't just flow consistently between those two. But you do, if you have gate activations, you do have, semi consistent access to whatever that gift is. If it is open, you have no gate activations. There's no little circles in there. It's just a completely white shape and no definition of the gates whatsoever. I have two of these in my chart. My ajna is completely open and my throat is completely open.
Got it, got it. So if it's open, it's almost like a dam where the floodgates are open and the water could just flow through. If
Yeah.
it's if it's undefined, it's, like, kinda blocked and there's, like, pressure for the water, but the water just can't, like, get through the dam. So it's just basically how open is, like, that opening for that energy to flow through.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And the interesting thing about, like, the ones that you told me about, like, the empaths is last night during dinner, um, we were asking our youngest daughter, like, what she wanna do for extracurricular activities, and I noticed, like, my wife was, like, a little bit frustrated with her because she couldn't, like, decide, like, did she wanna do music, roller skating, jujitsu, gymnastics, and, I'm, like, much I'm I'm much less strict on my kids than my wife. My wife grew up in China, so I think she still has, like, kinda like this, like, hyper performance, framework that she grew up with, and so our daughter actually, like, shut down,
Mm,
and she shed a little tear, and I was like, "What's wrong?" Like, most kids, if they could decide what they could do, are kinda happy, and she was having trouble, articulating what she was going through. And even a few hours later, when I put her down, she was still kind of just keeping to herself. And now, I mean, she's definitely someone that has spiritual gifts. She's sensitive. And now I believe, based on what you were talking about, was like she was just picking up on some of, I don't wanna just blame my wife, but, I think my energy was pretty grounded and solid, But, my wife was definitely like, "Hey, if you don't choose something, like, you have to have, like, an opinion on something. You can't just say like, we can't just choose it for you," you know? So, I believe she was picking up on some of that energy of just, like, feeling, like, maybe disappointment or something from my wife that, didn't make her feel good. Because I just asked her several times, like, "Hey, like, if you don't ever articulate, what's going through you, like, we can't help." And she was just like, "I don't know. I just don't feel good." So I think, what you just said most likely was she was just picking up on the energy. It shifted the way she was feeling, and she didn't have any insight or ability to articulate like why she felt this change in her physiology.
It could be that as well, but it also sounds like, and hopefully her time of birth is on her birth certificate, but it also sounds like she has, either an undefined or open G center. So this is the center that I was talking about. That's the center for love, identity, and direction. And so when you don't have definition in this area, like you can be great at a lot of things, but nothing ever feels like your thing. Like, and it's
Mm,
actually aligned for these individuals to, be in different environments where like they can sample the energy of other people. I have this defined. So I have kind of like a clear like core of like, okay, this is the direction that I want to go in. This is who I am. And it serves me because I have a lot of, like, workhorse energy from, like, my root and sacral spleen areas, but my partner has this completely open, so he has no definition in this area, and my daughter has a couple of activations, but hers is undefined, and so for them for I'll use him as an example, like, he's at a point right now where he doesn't he doesn't really know what he wants to do. He doesn't know, like, what is going to light him up. He doesn't know what that next thing is because there's all this pressure, there's all these options, and he's like, "I just wish I knew what my thing was, and I don't." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, you're meant to sample stuff. It'll change over time." Like, I try and, like,
yeah.
empower him to, like, obviously still try, but nothing one of the things that I've heard through readings when people have this center open or undefined is like, you fit in everywhere that you go, but there's no place that ever really feels like home.
Mm.
And I get how that can be unsettling because 'cause I'm like, I know what home is. I know what it feels like. I can't describe it, but, like, it's a feeling that I know.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think you kind of answered my next question, but if someone does have something undefined like that, like what it would be the work to, is it just trying out more things until you find the thing that really lands with you? Or is there something that could be done to open it up so that it does help you kind of like get guided into the right direction for the things that do really align and resonate with you?
Yeah, so when clients come to me who have this center undefined or open, I always well, whether they have it defined or not, I always start with their conscious sun and earth gates and their unconscious sun and earth gates because those will tell us like what they're here to do, what they're here to learn, what deeply fulfills them, like what keeps them healthy, and what their purpose is. And so when we go through in depth, like the gene keys, descriptions of these gates, the shadows, when we go through the human design side of it, the descriptions, have they lived because of their conditioning in the reactive, version of the shadow or the repressive version of the shadow? And they're able to reflect. They're like, okay, yeah, I have been doing more of this, but they understand the potential of whatever the gift is. Then I'm able to ask them some reflection questions. And a lot of those questions are around like, um, what is like I know one of the questions is like, what's your creative muse? what is something that you could do that really brings you satisfaction and joy without, thinking about the material. And so through those types of reflection questions, they're able to kind of start seeing areas in their life where they have been lit up. But maybe it wasn't something that, their friends liked or their family liked or
Mm,
society said was gonna make them successful. So they kinda put it to the side and they were like, "Well, I gotta do something real. I gotta get a real job because that's not gonna be." But when they recognize that this is a part of their purpose here, a part of what they're here to contribute to the world, it's like a spark kinda goes off in them and it's like, "Oh, like, okay. I could do that then. Yeah.
got it, got it. So, it's not necessarily like they just can't find something that resonates with them. They might have found something that resonated with them, but because that part wasn't as clearly defined or open, they could be easily convinced by someone that's like, "Ah, being a break dancer's a dumb thing to
Yeah.
pursue in life," or maybe in Australia it is, but, um, not out here in the US. I've seen our B-boys and they're freaking good.
Yeah.
Um, that's super interesting, and I don't know why this just popped into my head, but, earlier you were talking about, um, the intentions before you take your microdose, and that stuck with me because, um I know how to grow cannabis, indoors pretty well, but I live on a farm now, and we've been growing our own food, and when I was growing indoors, it was hydroponics and a bunch of chemicals and stuff like that, and now we're growing in the soil, and, it's just like a whole different experience, but one of the things that we've been really focusing on is, like, when we're out there, we're not listening to, like, a podcast, we're just out there putting our hands in the soil, hanging out with, like, the bugs, the bees, the random garden snakes that we see, and really trying to cultivate, like, a healthy relationship with our food, and, it reminded me of, like, the way that you were taking microdoses, 'cause, you know, for, like, maybe 15 years, I was like a wake and bake stoner, just like get up, take a dab, go to work, and, um, you know, it I believe it benefited me, but what I can see in hindsight is that a lot of the cannabis use was more habitual than intentional, meaning, "Hey, it's 4:20 right now, I'm used to taking a rip right now, I'm just gonna take a rip." And when I found that when I put intention, whether it's into my gardening, whether it's into a bong rip, whether it's into telling my kids like a bedtime story, like it just shifts the energy. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on intention as a energy alignment coach?
Yeah, I think that intention is super important. So, 2 things. The first is I'll start with the dabbing and things, because this is relevant in my life right now. I had to take a THC break for the clinical trial because they don't want you on anything mind altering. So if I was on antidepressants, I had to stop taking them. And so I have already been through this THC break thing and I was appreciative of it because, well, one, it reset my tolerance, but also it made me notice the effect that it was having on my body because, like you said, it did become habitual. And I started to notice that, not everything people claim is a sativa is actually a sativa. Like sometimes it's that hybrid leans indica, but they might say it's sativa. But one of the things that my partner and I decided to do after my birthday this year was we decided to take a THC break together. And so he has been like a dabber, like hands down. Like he'll smoke with me, but after we smoke, he'll take a dab immediately. Like, and he's like you, 420, take a dab, wake up, take a dab. And I knew that it was it was contributing to his depression because he was just numbing himself all the time. And he has, like, really bad anxiety, so, like, I got it, but it was like, I feel like you couldn't go a day without doing this. And so now he's seeing areas where when he is smoking again, he is going to be more intentional. He's not just going to wake up in the morning, straight dabs to the face, like, and do the things. So intention is super important, like with what we're putting into our bodies. And to that effect, someone told me about this study. I forget who it was, but they talked about how they had one group who, like, they would speak positive intentions and healthy thoughts and things like that before they drank this glass of water. And then the other people, they would, just have like negative talk or whatever and things like that. And then, of course, the control group who just drank the water. And what they found was the people who spoke the positive intentions and they set, you know, that that environment, that setting around ingesting this in like energy, I guess, into their body, they had greater health. They had, more of a positive outlook on life. And so it just goes to show you, especially when we know that the throat center is how we bring manifestation into form. So when we're able to speak these positive things and then ingest these things with appreciation and gratitude, it will totally transform the outcome of whatever it is that you're putting into your body.
Yeah. Yeah. I've read similar studies and, there's a book called Messages in Water by Dr. Miyamoto where he, um, people were, like, basically sending intentions into the water. He would freeze them and then, cut, like, a slice of it and look at it under a microscope. And, yeah, when it was positive intentions, he would have these beautiful snowflake crystalline structures, and then when it was, like, death metal or you were, like, yelling, like, "Nazi, Nazi," into it, it would just form, like, these really, like, visually unpleasing shapes. And the fact that we're made up of so much water, it totally makes sense to me. And it's so interesting, like even thoughts, to me, I believe thoughts are energy. It's like, these thought forms are coming in and out of our brain. And, when I was younger, it made sense to me. Hey, if you're like a positive thinker, you would experience things more positively. So I took it kind of like metaphorically. But now when I think about like these latest models of quantum physics and they're talking about everything everywhere all at once and how there's infinite possibilities for the future, but there are certain futures that are more likely depending on the energy that's going on. It did really make me think about like, yeah, or it goes back to like the people in our group coaching classes that were running businesses. It's like, what type of energy were they bringing in? Did they have a belief system that allowed them to see that they would be successful? Or do they have a belief system that's like, well, I'll just try this and whatever happens, happens, and just kind of maybe not really believing it. And it's just fascinating to think about, like in this day and age, that there's like science. I mean, like the or the Nobel Science winners this year, they won for quantum entanglement to show like how everything was like connected. And I believe that like soon we'll be able to, like, people on LinkedIn would be talking about energy and these things as if, it was just as normal as sharing best practices on sales and marketing. Because, yeah, if you think about doing executive coaching or business coaching, like the vast majority of people that I coached, they had like MBAs and stuff and they knew a lot about like financial modeling and this, that, and the other. But, at least the ones that I coached, it was never about business coaching. It was like, how are you showing up? Are you even in alignment with what you're doing? And, it was interesting, at least for me, a lot of the people came to me wanting to be entrepreneurs, or starting their own thing. And I would say like at least like 30 to 40% of them after we got done coaching were just like, I don't even want to do this anymore, and decided to do something completely different with their lives.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I was actually just talking to somebody earlier today. She was saying, like, we see these social media posts where it's like, if you like doing nails or you like, doing hair or whatever, like, you should start a business in it. And it's like, there are some people who just love doing that, and they would just do it for free for the people that they love because of the enjoyment. Not everything that we love to do, we have to start a business around it. Like, it's it's one of those things where once you realize what the beliefs and the intentions are that are driving whatever it is, you start to realize like, oh, I'm shooting myself into this. And one of my mentors, she said it like so beautifully. She's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Don't should on yourself.
Yeah. Oh, I love kinda like where this conversation is going because I do believe I mean, like, I ran a cannabis vaporizer company. I love smoking weed and I love vaporizing, and I was like, "Yeah, this is the one thing that, like, if I get to do this, my life is gonna be like, so complete." And it was a great time, but there was, like, tons of pressures dealing with investors, employees that were, like, just a lot of, like, headaches as well, and, I came to the conclusion similarly to you is, like, your purpose in life does not need to be how you monetize things. And as a matter of fact, in my circle of friends and clients is that when they monetize their passion, they were much less passionate about it. Like I had at least 4 or 5 that wanted to become professional musicians. When they became professional musicians, then they had to compromise their message because they needed to sell more records. And so many of them went back to being accountants, whatever their day jobs were, and then they play music Friday and Saturday night, and they could play whatever their heart desires, be in complete alignment and completely separate like, okay, hey, there's something I do for 40 hours in the week that I monetize, I pay the bills. And then there's this other thing that really makes me feel in alignment with the universe, allows me to express myself at my like truest, most transparent, authentic potentiality. And to me, that's maybe one of the most important messages coming out of today is that the thing that you love doing you don't have to monetize it, like, I mean, what's interesting is now, like, I design vaporizers, but I don't have to run a company, and I'm like, "Oh, man, this is just so much better." I just sit there, design stuff, and some other guy is making all the decisions, and then in my free time, like, I get to talk about, like, spirituality, expansion of consciousness, and the interesting thing is I've been getting like, my coaching business has been, making just as much money with me not paying attention to it, and, it's just kinda, like, funny how these things work out, because there was a period where I was like, landing page, lead magnet, Facebook ad optimization, just putting so much effort, and, interestingly enough, that's when my business did the worst, and, what I realized was the energy I was bringing into it wasn't like an energy of service, it was like this desperate, like, "I need to make this work" energy, and I believe, like, that kinda drove people away from me.
Yeah, I agree, and it goes back to what were saying earlier, which was honestly an aha for me. Like like it's one of those things where like you talk about something all the time, you know it to be true, but then someone actually says the words, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. But when you were talking about like time abundance, physical abundance, like abundance looks like a bunch of different things, and a lot of times, again, with the cultural messages that are put out to us, it's like we see, these proven strategies and frameworks for these 10K months. And so it makes you think about like, okay, yes, financial abundance is a thing. But even when I look at my life right now, it's like my partner and I, we're back in the gym now that my daughter's in school, and so the physical abundance is there. I I fill my own calendar up with a bunch of stuff, but, like, if I wanted to, the time abundance is there. So it's, like, one of those things where you have to really, and that's why the self-awareness piece is so critical, and the reflection. I I used to give Gene Keys a lot of crap because I was like, human design is like, you do this, you have these gifts, it's like a map. And when I would look at Gene Keys, it was like, you just want me to think about how this is showing up in my life? Like how long do I think about this for that it actually starts to like do a thing in real life, but in actuality, like stopping and taking stock and being in your awareness is really what's going to help you the most, is like being able to see these things. So I appreciate that aha from earlier. I didn't give you credit for it, but I was like, I have to before this conversation is over.
Thank you so much. I received that. And, another thing kind of popped into my head, about like the inner critic thing. And it's interesting because about a year ago, I hired another coach because I was telling him like my inner critic is just rampant. Like I know better, but he's just loud, like he'll just say shit that, like, throws me off even when there's no evidence of that in my life, and it just throws me off. And one of the things that he shared with me that I'll always remember is that your inner critic isn't like this like, static voice in your head. As you evolve and your consciousness expands, your inner critic also expands. Like, he wants to stay one step ahead of you. And so when he planted that belief in my mind, I was like, "This makes total sense." And I don't know if you've ever studied this framework called spiral dynamics, but it's about the 8 stages of consciousness and how higher levels aren't necessarily better. They're just like 12th grade isn't more important than 3rd grade if you wanna go to college, they're all foundational. And so in spiral dynamics, they have this like outward spiral going, and they said they call it spiral dynamics because you'll keep coming back to the same problems, but then at like a more challenging, more granular level. So what he said aligned with what I had been learning about spiral dynamics because many lessons of my life I've had to learn multiple times, and when I had to learn them multiple times, I would always ask myself, like, "Am I actually learning these things, or does it just feel like I learned them, but I make the same mistakes?" And that gave me, like, so much more confidence that, like, no, it's my ego mind wants me to pay attention to it, so it's just getting trickier and trickier. So as I expand my consciousness, my ego mind or my inner critic is also doing that. And then now I just feel like I have like this dance partner that is always kind of like challenging me, but now that I know how to manage my inner critic a little bit better, instead of like, just kind of butting heads with it, it's like, okay, hey, now you're now you're making me just dig a little bit more deep to practice more self-care or to practice more boundaries or to practice more whatever it is that I need to cultivate. And yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you because when you had said that, I made a mental note of like, yeah, yeah. My mental or my inner critic is kind of like an asshole, man. Like he knows exactly what to say to me to like really trigger me. And, like even when I try to meditate, sometimes he's like, "Oh, this meditation's not gonna work. You're not gonna be able to connect with source energy. You're just imagining it." I'm like, man, this guy really knows how to like put like doubt into my head. But now that I have a better relationship with my inner critic, and just I guess it kind of goes back to some fundamental lessons that I'm always learning, which is like radical self acceptance. It's like even accept the inner critic and see that your inner critic is there to help you expand versus help trying to suppress your expansion.
I love that, and I love that you had that dynamic. I had not heard of spiral dynamics, so I wrote it down so I can look into it, because that's exactly right, and so many times because our inner critics are so loud, and like you said, they know exactly what to say to push our buttons. It's like ch everything is a perspective shift away from helping you, and so to know that to hear you say that your inner critic is just basically challenging you to work on whatever it is, whether it's self-care or what have you. Like, in Gene Keys, we have these genetic wounds and they're passed down from different lifetimes. And so my genetic wound is the wound of denial. And the way to heal the wound is through relaxation and ease. And that's hard for me because I feel like if I'm not doing something, then I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm like, "You just want me to sit here and just, like, focus on my thoughts sometimes?" Like, focus on my breathing. Like, I'm not doing anything. Like the inner critic's like, but you're not doing anything. Like that's not gonna help you. And it's like, actually it is though, because in taking this time for myself and being the example a lot of times, especially with that 5 line, like I thrive best in a position of leadership or influence. So if I'm doing the things that I need to do to take care of myself, then it oftentimes inspires other people to do the same. Like even with boundaries, like when I for my birthday, I completely unplugged. And when I came back, I let people know like, "Hey, apologies for the delay, but I was with my family in nature." And some people, they felt some type of way, but a lot of people were like, "That's good for you." Like for
Yeah.
setting that boundary and sticking to it.
Yeah, I love that. I love this conversation. I know you're in Maryland, but if you ever find yourself in California, you are 100% welcome here. And actually, like we moved from this like 1,300 square foot townhome in San Francisco. Now we got a couple acres, and we designed it this way where we grow all of our own food. We have our own water. So if my Bay Area friends want to come up, eat some mushrooms for the weekend, they stick on one side of the property. I watch their kids on the other side and just let them like totally relax and get their energy back. And, you know, what I typically do at the end of these is I always want to give a chance. Like I know we talked about a whole bunch of other things. We went fast forward back in time. We did a whole bunch of meandering about whatever came top of mind. But I wanted to give you a chance to communicate to the audience what is top of mind for Diamond right now. What is the most important thing that you'd like to express?
Ooh, I love that, and I'm definitely gonna take you up on that offer if I'm in California because I used to go there all the time, but not so much now. But I will say, um, if you have questions about human design, if you wanna get to know yourself on this energetic level, the best way to connect with me is by learning something about you. So on my website, there's a free chart generator where listeners can pull their chart and they can see some of these definition areas. They can see some of these gifts. And unlike the chart that I pulled, it gives you little blurbs about what each of these things means and how it is a strength for you. And if they want, they can download the ebook that gives them some really practical strategies on how they sleep best for their energy type. How do they handle overwhelm and pressure, and how their immune system was designed. So, if they want to connect with me and learn more about human design and gene keys, that is where they can find me, diamonddripconsulting.com.
Diamonddripconsulting.com. Perfect. And I hope people listening take you up on that. Like I really believe that when you can make this shift, and really see things less in this 3D space-time Newtonian physics framework and get into the quantum of energy and realize that all the building blocks of physical reality starts with energy, not with actual solid material things, it will start switching your ability. I believe, when I tell people I could bend reality, like I 100% believe it. I know that I could connect to higher dimensional entities. And yeah, the one thing actually, sorry, well, this is my podcast. We could go a little bit longer. No, there's no rules here. Is that, if your ajna is completely open, I, and your throat chakra, I believe like you could access these. And I'll send you one of my meditations that I made for myself, but it's basically just a visualization exercise, opening up the third eye, allowing for outgoing communication, allowing for incoming communication. And then I'll either just record myself like channeling the message or I'll do some automatic writing. But I believe that if yours is already open, I've been practicing this probably for like 2.5 years now, but I just have a feeling like you'll be able to drop into it pretty quickly. My sister, you have kind of like a similar vibe to when my sister was younger. And when I had her do this, like within like 2 or 3 tries, she was like channeling this information already. So I feel like you can do the same and really develop those spiritual gifts because I am a huge proponent of psychedelics, but I also know that like you have kids, I have kids. I can't like just go off for a 3-day weekend and drink ayahuasca 3 nights without like severely like changing like my wife's like weekend.
Yeah.
So I'd
I
love to send
appreciate
that
that.
over to you.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I received that and I'm so appreciative because I would love to be able to access this information. I love plant medicine dearly, but like you said, to really go into those deeper levels of consciousness, like it affects the partner.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. So diamonddripconsulting.com. And what other are your social channels for people that want to get in contact with you?
Yeah, I am on everything: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I'm even on Threads, even though I still don't really understand it. And YouTube.
And is it all Diamond Drip Consulting?
Diamond Drip discussions. Honestly, I have done a great job with the content that I put out. Hashtag Coach Diamond Drip is on all of my content. So no matter what platform you're on, if you search Coach Diamond Drip, I will show up.
Beautiful. Coach Diamond Drip, just search it. You'll be able to find her. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. I really appreciate you bringing the energy. And if you want more energy alignment, you guys know where to go. And I just have so much gratitude for you reaching out. It was an awesome connection. And I look forward to watching you grow and to see where our relationship evolves to.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right, beautiful people. If you guys enjoyed that podcast, please, please, please consider leaving a review, leave a comment, share it with a friend, subscribe to this channel. I am trying to grow this channel. It is something I'd love to do more of, to interview lovely people like Coach Diamond Drip. So if you could do your part, help me by sharing this podcast, commenting, or liking and subscribing. I would definitely appreciate it. And I will see you guys next week.